The first indication something was wrong came at 3:47 hours, when NORAD's Montana tracking station lost contact with a single aircraft moving at impossible speeds through restricted airspace. The blip had appeared suddenly on screens across 3 states, defying every protocol, every expectation, every logical explanation. Controllers watched in stunned silence as the unidentified contact executed maneuvers that should have torn any known aircraft apart, banking at angles that violated the laws of physics while maintaining velocities that made seasoned radar operators question their equipment. Major Elena Vasquez pressed her headset closer to her ear in the darkened command center, her coffee growing cold as she studied the erratic flight path traced across her monitor. 23 years of military service had taught her to trust her instincts, and right now, every instinct screamed that this wasn't some equipment malfunction or atmospheric anomaly. The aircraft, whatever it was, moved with purpose, with intelligence, with an almost predatory awareness of the F-22 Raptors scrambling to intercept it from Malmstrom Air Force Base. "Control, this is Viper 1-1. We have visual on unknown aircraft," crackled through the radio, the pilot's voice tight with concentration. "Requesting permission to identify." Elena's fingers hovered over the communication panel. Standard protocol demanded immediate identification of any unauthorized aircraft in restricted airspace, especially one exhibiting such unusual flight characteristics. But something about the contact's behavior pattern nagged at her, the way it seemed to anticipate the F-22's approach vectors, the deliberate nature of its seemingly erratic movements. Viper 1-1, maintain safe distance and attempt radio contact on all frequencies, she responded, her voice steady despite the growing tension in the room. Around her, other controllers leaned forward in their chairs, drawn into the unfolding mystery like moths to flame. The unknown aircraft appeared to be some variant of fighter jet, its silhouette familiar yet wrong somehow, as if someone had taken a known design and twisted it into something entirely new. Its matte black finish absorbed radar signatures in ways that made tracking difficult, and its flight profile suggested capabilities that exceeded anything in the current inventory of any known military. As the F-22s closed distance, the mystery aircraft performed what could only be described as a wing dip, a subtle, almost casual acknowledgement of their presence that sent chills down Elena's spine. It was too human, too deliberate, too much like a greeting between old friends. Fighter pilots didn't greet potential threats, they identified, intercepted, and neutralized. But this wing dip carried something different entirely, a message that spoke of shared skis and common purpose, of secrets hidden in plain sight and truths waiting to be uncovered in the vast emptiness above the Montana plains. Captain Marcus Reaper Chen had logged over 2,000 flight hours in the F-22 Raptor, had flown missions over Syria, Afghanistan, and half a dozen classified operations that didn't officially exist. He considered himself unflappable, a steady hand in an unstable world, but the aircraft dancing through the morning sky ahead of him defied every tactical manual he'd ever studied. Its movements were liquid, almost organic, as if the machine had transcended the mechanical limitations that bound every other aircraft to the harsh realities of physics and engineering. "Unknown aircraft, you are in violation of restricted airspace," he transmitted, his voice carrying across frequencies that should have reached any pilot within 100 miles. "Identify yourself immediately and follow my aircraft to designated landing area." The response came not through radio, but through action. The mystery aircraft executed a barrel roll that should have been impossible at its current speed, emerging from the maneuver in perfect formation alongside Reaper's Raptor. The precision was breathtaking, the kind of flying that separated legends from ordinary pilots, and for a moment, Reaper forgot about protocols and procedures, lost in admiration for whoever commanded such skill. "Holy shit," whispered his wingman, Lieutenant Jake Bulldog Morrison, breaking radio silence. "Did you see that approach vector? That's not human flying." But Reaper was studying the aircraft more closely now, noting details that sent recognition sparking through his memory. The wing configuration, the air intake design, the subtle modifications to what appeared to be a heavily customized F-16, all of it familiar, like a half-remembered dream or a story told around late-night poker games in officer quarters. His mind raced through possibilities, through rumors and legends that circulated in the shadowy corners of military aviation. "Control, Viper 1-1, he transmitted, his voice lower now, more thoughtful. "I'm getting a closer look at our visitor. Aircraft appears to be a modified Fighting Falcon, but the modifications are extensive. This isn't standard military issue." The mystery pilot maintained perfect formation, neither aggressive nor submissive, simply present in a way that suggested complete confidence in their abilities and intentions. Through his canopy, Reaper caught a glimpse of the pilot's helmet, its reflective visor revealing nothing but his own F-22's image reflected back at him. Yet something about the posture, the way the pilot held their head, the subtle hand gestures visible on the control stick, stirred memories he couldn't quite place. Alina's voice crackled through his headset, calm but insistent. "Viper 1-1, maintain visual contact but do not engage unless directly threatened. We're trying to establish communications through alternative channels." The morning sun climbed higher, painting the Montana sky in shades of gold and amber, and in that crystalline air, with the mystery aircraft holding perfect formation beside him, Reaper felt the weight of something significant unfolding. This wasn't just another intercept mission or routine patrol. This was the beginning of something that would challenge everything he thought he knew about the skis he'd spent his career defending. Alina Vasquez had seen her share of unusual incidents during her tenure at NORAD, but the methodical way this unknown pilot maintained formation, while simultaneously evading positive identification, suggested someone with intimate knowledge of military procedures and protocols. The aircraft's behavior wasn't that of an enemy probe or confused civilian pilot. It was too precise, too aware of the tactical situation to be anything other than military trained. "Ma'am," called Sergeant Rodriguez from the communications station, his young face creased with concentration. "I'm picking up fragmentary transmissions on old military frequencies, but they're encrypted with codes that predate our current systems by at least 15 years. Alina moved to his station, studying the scrolling data on his screen. The encryption patterns were familiar. She'd used similar codes during her own flying days, back when she'd piloted A-10 Warthogs over hostile territory, and learned that survival often depended on who you trusted with your position and intentions. These weren't enemy codes. They were distinctly American, but from an era when military aviation operated under different assumptions about secrecy and operational security. "Can you break the encryption?" she asked, watching as Rodriguez's fingers flew across his keyboard. "Working on it, ma'am. The base algorithm is military standard, but there are modifications that suggest whoever's transmitting knows our systems intimately." Above the planes, the aerial ballet continued. The mystery aircraft had begun a series of maneuvers that Reaper recognized as standard identification protocols, but executed with modifications that spoke of experience in situations where standard procedures might prove inadequate or dangerous. Each movement was a statement, a carefully crafted message designed to communicate intent without revealing vulnerability. "Viper 1-1, are you seeing this?" Morrison's voice was tight with concentration. "Our friend is running through ID protocols, but they're modified versions. This pilot knows military procedure inside and out." Reaper acknowledged with a brief radio click, his attention focused on the subtle details of the other aircraft's performance. The pilot was clearly skilled, but more than that, they were communicating through the language of military aviation, a complex vocabulary of gestures, formations, and maneuvers that spoke to anyone with sufficient experience to understand. Each wing waggle, Each formation adjustment carried meaning, and slowly, Reaper began to decode the message being transmitted through pure airmanship. The mystery pilot was trying to tell them something important enough to risk interception, important enough to violate restricted airspace, and draw the attention of some of the most advanced fighter aircraft in the world. As the morning sun continued its climb across the endless Montana sky, Reaper found himself caught between duty and curiosity, between the demands of his mission and the growing certainty that this encounter would change everything. He thought he knew about the boundaries between friend and foe. Rodriguez's breakthrough came suddenly, his voice cutting through the command center's focused tension like lightning through storm clouds. "Ma'am, I've got partial decryption on those transmissions. The pilot is broadcasting identification codes, but they're not current military. These codes were used by a special operations unit that was officially disbanded 12 years ago." Alina felt her blood chill as Rodriguez continued reading from his screen. The call sign being transmitted is Nomad, and the unit identifier corresponds to the 4th Fighter Squadron's Black Operations Division, the unit that conducted deep reconnaissance missions in denied airspace during the Syrian conflict. The 4th Fighter Squadron's Black Ops Division. Alina knew that designation, had heard whispers about their missions in classified briefings and late-night conversations between senior officers who'd been cleared for information that officially didn't exist. They'd operated modified aircraft on missions that pushed the boundaries of international law and military protocol, flying deep into hostile territory to gather intelligence and conduct operations that conventional forces couldn't accomplish. That unit was dissolved after the Syrian incident, Alina said quietly, her mind racing through implications. All personnel were reassigned or retired, and their aircraft were supposedly scrapped or transferred to research programs. But even as she spoke, she remembered the rumors, stories about pilots who disappeared from official records, about modified aircraft that had vanished from inventories, about operations that continued in the shadows long after their official authorization had expired. The military aviation community was small enough that stories traveled, and persistent enough that some stories never died completely. Above them, Reaper was experiencing his own moment of recognition. The formation flying, the subtle communication through aircraft positioning, the modified F-16 with its non-standard modifications. All of it was beginning to coalesce into a pattern he'd encountered before, in briefings about operations that existed in the gray areas between official military action and plausible deniability. "Control, Viper 1-1, he transmitted, his voice carrying a new note of understanding. "I believe our visitor may be friendly, requesting permission to attempt close-range visual identification." Alina hesitated, weighing protocols against instinct, official procedure against the growing evidence that this wasn't a standard intercept situation. The mystery pilot had made no aggressive moves, had actually seemed to go out of their way to demonstrate peaceful intention while simultaneously showcasing capabilities that suggested they could have easily evaded detection if they'd chosen to. Viper 1-1, approved for close visual identification, but maintain defensive positioning and be prepared to disengage on my command. As Reaper maneuvered his F-22 closer to the mystery aircraft, the morning light shifted, and for the first time, he caught a clear glimpse of the other pilot through their canopy, a figure whose posture and helmet configuration seemed hauntingly familiar, like a half-remembered photograph or a face glimpsed in passing years ago. The close-range identification revealed details that sent recognition cascading through Reaper's consciousness like pieces of a puzzle, finally clicking into place. The pilot's helmet bore markings that were subtle but unmistakable to anyone who knew where to look, victory tallies that corresponded to missions over Syria and Iraq, squadron patches that had been officially discontinued, and most telling of all, a small emblem on the helmet's crown that Reaper recognized from classified briefings about deep reconnaissance operations. But it was the aircraft itself that provided the final confirmation. What he'd initially taken for modifications to a standard F-16 were actually extensive customizations that transformed the Fighting Falcon into something entirely different, a stealth-capable, long-range reconnaissance platform designed for missions that required both invisibility and survivability in hostile airspace. The radar-absorbing materials, the modified air intakes, the subtle changes to the wing configuration, all of it spoke to a level of engineering sophistication that existed only in the black world of special operations. "Control, Viper 1-1, Reaper transmitted, his voice carrying a new weight of understanding. "I have positive identification on our visitor. This is a friendly aircraft operating under special authorization. The pilot is broadcasting proper identification codes for Operation Nightshade, authorization level Omega 7. In the command center, Alina felt the pieces of the puzzle sliding into place. Operation Nightshade. She'd heard that designation in contexts that required the highest levels of security clearance, operations that existed in the spaces between official military action and covert intelligence gathering. If this pilot was operating under Nightshade authorization, it meant they were involved in missions that most military personnel would never know existed. Viper 1-1, maintain formation and escort the aircraft to Alpha 7 landing coordinates, Alina commanded, her voice steady despite the implications of what they'd discovered. Full security protocols are now in effect. As the three aircraft banked toward the designated landing area, Reaper found himself studying the mystery pilot with new appreciation. Whoever they were, they'd managed to penetrate some of the most sophisticated air defense systems in the world, had demonstrated flying skills that bordered on supernatural, and had communicated their intentions through a complex language of aerial maneuvers that spoke to decades of military experience. The landing approach was executed with the same precision that had characterized the entire encounter. The mystery aircraft touched down first, its modified landing gear handling the runway with the confidence of countless similar landings, while the F-22s maintained overwatch until the aircraft had come to a complete stop. Only then did Reaper and Morrison land, their Raptors flanking the mysterious visitor like honor guards escorting a dignitary. As ground crews surrounded the aircraft and security personnel established a perimeter, Reaper remained in his cockpit, watching as the mystery pilot began their post-flight procedures with the methodical precision of someone for whom such routines had become second nature through repetition across hundreds of similar missions. The canopy of the mystery aircraft lifted with a soft hydraulic hiss, and for the first time, Reaper caught sight of the pilot who had led them on this morning's aerial dance across the Montana sky. The figure that emerged was smaller than he'd expected, moving with the efficient grace of someone accustomed to operating in environments where every motion mattered. As the pilot removed their helmet, long dark hair spilled out, and Reaper felt recognition hit him like a physical blow. Commander Iskra, Nomad, Petrov had been presumed dead for 3 years, ever since her aircraft had disappeared during a classified mission over Eastern European airspace. Her loss had been mourned quietly within the special operations community, her name added to the unofficial roll of those who'd sacrificed everything for missions that would never be publicly acknowledged. Yet here she stood, very much alive, her presence raising questions that would ripple through the highest levels of military command. Alina arrived at the aircraft within minutes, her security detail maintaining a respectful distance as she approached the pilot who turned a routine morning into something that would require briefings at levels far above her clearance grade. Iskra stood beside her modified F-16, her flight suit bearing no insignia or identification beyond a single patch, the ghostly outline of an aircraft that seemed to exist between visibility and invisibility, between presence and absence. "Commander Petrov," Alina said, her voice carrying both relief and confusion. "We were told you were killed in action over Romania 3 years ago." Iskra's smile was tired but genuine, carrying the weight of missions that existed in the spaces between official military action and necessary deception. Reports of my death, as they say, have been greatly exaggerated. I've been operating under deep cover, conducting reconnaissance missions that required complete deniability. My presence here indicates that situation has changed. Behind her, ground crews were documenting the modifications to her aircraft with the systematic thoroughness of specialists who understood they were examining technology that existed nowhere in official inventories. The stealth modifications, the extended range capabilities, the advanced avionics, all of it represented years of development in facilities that didn't appear on any organizational charts. Reaper had climbed down from his F-22 and was approaching with the careful respect accorded to legends who'd proven their mortality was more complex than simple life or death. He'd heard stories about Nomad during his early career, tales of impossible missions completed against overwhelming odds, of a pilot whose skills had become the stuff of legend within the close-knit community of special operations aviators. "Commander," he said simply, offering the abbreviated salute appropriate to the circumstances. "It's an honor. I've heard stories." Iskra's expression softened slightly, recognizing in Reaper's voice the respect that one professional pilot accorded another. "The stories are probably half true and twice as dangerous as the reality," she replied. "But thank you for the professional intercept. You handled the situation exactly as I'd hoped." Alina was studying the implications of Iskra's presence, her mind racing through the possibilities and protocols that would need to be activated. A presumed dead special operations pilot appearing without warning in restricted airspace suggested either a mission gone wrong or intelligence of sufficient importance to justify breaking years of deep cover. "Commander, we need to discuss your situation immediately. There are protocols for your return, debriefings that will be required, and questions that extend far beyond my authority to answer." Iskra nodded, her expression growing serious as she looked toward the horizon where the morning sun continued its climb across the endless Montana sky. "Major, the information I'm carrying requires immediate attention at the highest levels of command. What I've learned during my time in deep cover has implications for national security that extend far beyond anything I've encountered in 20 years of military service." The weight of unspoken secrets hung in the morning air like a promise of revelations that would challenge everything they thought they knew about the boundaries between peace and conflict, between the official actions of military forces and the shadow operations that protected national interests through means that could never be officially acknowledged. In the secure briefing room beneath NORAD's Montana facility, Iskra faced a panel of officers whose combined clearance levels represented access to some of the nation's most closely guarded secrets. The room itself was a testament to paranoia refined into architecture, walls lined with copper mesh to prevent electronic surveillance, air filtration systems that could detect the presence of microscopic recording devices, and communication systems that existed on networks completely isolated from conventional military channels. General Patricia Hawthorne, NORAD's deputy commander, studied the preliminary report Alina had prepared with the methodical attention of someone accustomed to information that could reshape strategic understanding overnight. The presence of a presumed dead special operations pilot raised questions that extended far beyond simple identity verification, touching on operational security protocols that had guided military planning for decades. "Commander Petrov," General Hawthorne began, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd spent 30 years navigating the complexities of military intelligence. "Your official status has been listed as killed in action for 3 years. The circumstances of your apparent death were classified at levels that require presidential authorization to discuss. Your presence here suggests either a catastrophic intelligence failure or information of extraordinary significance." Iskra sat with the relaxed alertness of someone accustomed to briefings where careers and lives hung in the balance of carefully chosen words. Her flight suit had been replaced with standard military utilities, but she wore them with the subtle differences that marked someone who'd spent years operating outside conventional command structures. "General, my death was necessary cover for an operation that required complete deniability. For the past 3 years, I've been conducting deep reconnaissance missions in airspace controlled by adversaries who would consider my presence an act of war. The intelligence I've gathered suggests preparations for actions that could fundamentally alter the strategic balance in Eastern Europe." The general's expression remained neutral, but Alina noted the way other officers in the room shifted slightly, recognizing the implications of intelligence gathered through means that couldn't be officially acknowledged. Deep reconnaissance missions in hostile airspace represented the kind of operation that existed in the gray areas between diplomacy and warfare, gathering information that conventional intelligence assets couldn't access. "What specific intelligence prompted you to break cover and return?" General Hawthorne asked, her question cutting through diplomatic niceties to the heart of operational necessity. Iskra reached into a document pouch that had been secured to her flight suit, withdrawing a series of photographs and data storage devices that represented 3 years of careful intelligence gathering. The images showed aircraft configurations that didn't match any known military inventory, installation layouts that suggested capabilities far beyond conventional defensive systems, and personnel movements that indicated preparations for operations of unprecedented scale. "General, over the past 18 months, I've documented the deployment of advanced aircraft systems that appear to incorporate technology we didn't know existed. These aren't modifications to existing platforms. They're entirely new designs that suggest breakthroughs in propulsion, stealth, and electronic warfare capabilities." The photographs passed from hand to hand around the briefing table, each image representing risks that Iskra had taken to gather intelligence that conventional satellites and signal intercepts couldn't provide. The aircraft in the images were sleek, angular designs that seemed to exist somewhere between current technology and science fiction, their configurations suggesting capabilities that would render existing air defense systems obsolete. Alina found herself studying one particular photograph that showed an aircraft in flight, its design so advanced that it seemed to bend light around its edges. If the intelligence was accurate, they were looking at technology that represented a quantum leap beyond anything in current military inventories. "Commander," General Hawthorne said quietly, "if this intelligence is accurate, it suggests our adversaries have achieved technological capabilities that would fundamentally alter the strategic balance of power. How confident are you in these assessments?" Iskra's response carried the weight of someone who'd spent 3 years of her life gathering information that could reshape global military planning. "General, I've observed these aircraft in operation. Their capabilities aren't theoretical, they're operational reality. And based on the deployment patterns I've documented, I believe they're preparing for operations that will test those capabilities against our most advanced systems." The silence that followed her words was heavy with implications that extended far beyond military planning into the realm of national survival. If hostile forces possessed technology that could neutralize America's air superiority, it would require a fundamental reassessment of strategic assumptions that had guided military planning for decades. General Hawthorne closed the intelligence folder with the careful precision of someone handling information that could start wars or prevent them. "Commander, you'll be debriefed by specialists who can properly assess the significance of your intelligence. In the meantime, your return will remain classified at the highest levels. As far as official records are concerned, you remain on deep cover assignment." As the briefing concluded and participants began filing out with the subdued efficiency of people carrying secrets that weighed heavier than physical burdens, Alina approached Iskra with the combination of professional respect and personal curiosity that marked their interaction since the morning's aerial encounter. "Commander, If you don't mind me asking, what was it like, spending 3 years presumed dead while conducting missions that officially didn't exist? Iskra's smile carried the complex mix of satisfaction and exhaustion that marked someone who'd pushed the boundaries of human endurance in service of objectives that transcended personal cost. Major, there's a particular kind of freedom that comes with being officially dead. No one expects reports, no one questions your methods, and no one second-guesses decisions that might seem impossible to justify through conventional military thinking. She paused, looking through the briefing room's small window toward the Montana sky, where her modified F-16 sat under heavy guard, surrounded by specialists who were documenting technology that existed nowhere in official inventories. But there's also a isolation that comes with operating completely outside normal command structures. For 3 years, I've been making decisions that could affect national security based on intelligence that I couldn't verify through conventional channels. Every mission carried the risk that I might be wrong, that my assessments might be flawed, that the information I was gathering might lead to strategic miscalculations with catastrophic consequences. Alina nodded, recognizing in Iskra's words the weight that came with responsibility that existed beyond normal military hierarchies. What made you decide to break cover now? Because the intelligence I've gathered suggests our adversaries are preparing to test their new capabilities against our systems within the next 6 months. If I'd remained under cover, that information would have died with me when their first strike eliminated our ability to respond effectively. The implications of Iskra's assessment hung between them like a challenge to everything they'd assumed about the current strategic balance. If hostile forces possessed the technological advantages her intelligence suggested, America's military superiority, the foundation of its global influence, could be neutralized in a matter of hours. Major, Iskra continued, the aircraft I've been flying represents 3 years of modifications and improvements based on direct observation of enemy capabilities. Every system has been upgraded to match or exceed what I've seen in their inventory. It's not just a reconnaissance platform anymore. It's a prototype for the kind of aircraft we'll need if we're going to maintain air superiority against technology that makes our current systems obsolete. Alina studied Iskra with new understanding, recognizing that the morning's encounter had been more than a simple return from deep cover. It had been a demonstration of capabilities that might represent America's only hope of maintaining strategic parity against adversaries who'd achieved technological breakthroughs that could reshape the balance of global power. The technical debriefing took place in a facility that existed in the spaces between official military installations and classified research programs, where specialists with clearances that exceeded most general officers' access to sensitive information examined Iskra's modified F-16 with the systematic thoroughness of archaeologists studying artifacts from an advanced civilization. Dr. Elizabeth Chen, the Air Force's senior technology assessment specialist, moved around the aircraft with the careful attention of someone who understood that every modification represented years of field-tested experience, translated into engineering solutions that pushed the boundaries of current aviation technology. The stealth modifications alone would have required research programs costing hundreds of millions of dollars, yet here they existed as practical applications developed through necessity and implemented with resources that didn't appear in any official budgets. Commander Petrov, Dr. Chen said, her voice carrying the fascination of a scientist confronted with evidence that theoretical possibilities had become operational realities. These modifications represent advances in materials science and aerodynamic engineering that our research programs projected wouldn't be feasible for at least another decade. How did you achieve this level of technological integration? Iskra stood beside her aircraft with the proprietary pride of someone who'd spent 3 years refining every system through direct application in environments where failure meant capture or death. Dr. Chen, When you're operating in hostile airspace against adversaries with technology that exceeds your capabilities, innovation becomes a matter of survival rather than academic research. Every modification you see was developed to counter specific threats I encountered during reconnaissance missions. The radar-absorbing materials that coated critical surfaces weren't just advanced composites. They were reactive systems that could adapt their electromagnetic properties based on the type of radar illumination they encountered. The engine modifications didn't just provide increased performance. They incorporated cooling systems that eliminated the thermal signatures that guided enemy missiles. The avionics weren't just upgraded computers. They were artificial intelligence systems that could process threat data and recommend tactical responses faster than human reflexes could implement them. Colonel James Mitchell, the Air Force's senior test pilot, was examining the aircraft's flight control systems with the professional appreciation of someone who understood the relationship between theoretical capability and practical application. "Commander, the flight characteristics you demonstrated this morning suggest maneuvering capabilities that should be impossible given the aircraft's apparent weight and power-to-weight ratio. What modifications account for this performance?" Iskra moved to the aircraft's air intake, pointing out subtle modifications that weren't immediately apparent to casual observation. "Colonel, the engine isn't just modified. It's been completely rebuilt around a hybrid propulsion system that combines conventional jet engine technology with electromagnetic field manipulation. The aircraft doesn't just push against air. It interacts with electromagnetic fields in ways that provide additional lift and maneuvering capability." The implications of her explanation sent ripples through the assembled specialists, who recognized that they were looking at technology that represented a fundamental breakthrough in aviation physics. If electromagnetic field manipulation could be successfully integrated with conventional propulsion, it would revolutionize aircraft design and performance in ways that would make current systems obsolete overnight. Dr. Chen was taking detailed photographs and measurements, documenting modifications that would require months of analysis to fully understand. "Commander, this level of technological integration suggests access to research facilities and resources that exceed anything in our current inventory. How did you accomplish this development while maintaining operational security?" Iskra's smile carried the satisfaction of someone who'd solved seemingly impossible problems through determination that bordered on obsession. "Dr. Chen, 3 years of deep cover operation provided access to intelligence about enemy technology that guided every modification. When you know exactly what threats you need to counter, innovation becomes much more focused and efficient." She moved to the aircraft's wing root, where subtle modifications housed systems that weren't immediately apparent. These aren't just random improvements, they're specific countermeasures to specific enemy capabilities. Every system has been tested in actual combat situations against the most advanced air defense systems our adversaries possess. Colonel Mitchell was studying flight data that Iskra's aircraft had recorded during the morning's encounter, noting performance parameters that exceeded the theoretical limits of any known aircraft design. "Commander, if this data is accurate, your aircraft achieved maneuvering capabilities that should have been impossible without structural failure. What modifications account for this performance?" "Colonel, the airframe isn't just strengthened. It's been rebuilt with materials that respond to stress by becoming stronger rather than weaker. The aircraft doesn't just survive extreme maneuvers, it becomes more capable as stress levels increase." As the technical examination continued, Alina observed from the facility's observation deck, recognizing that she was witnessing the documentation of technology that could reshape military aviation within months rather than decades. Iskra hadn't just returned from deep cover. She'd brought back solutions to problems that military research programs were still struggling to understand. The psychological evaluation was conducted by Dr. Sarah Westbrook, a military psychiatrist whose specialty involved assessing personnel who'd operated under extreme stress in situations where conventional support systems didn't exist. Her office was designed to project calm authority while incorporating subtle monitoring systems that could detect stress indicators that subjects might not consciously recognize or acknowledge. "Commander Petrov," Dr. Westbrook began, settling into her chair with the relaxed professionalism of someone accustomed to conversations that explored the psychological boundaries of human endurance. 3 years of deep cover operation represents an extreme test of psychological resilience. How did you maintain operational effectiveness while completely isolated from normal support systems? Iskra sat with the controlled relaxation of someone who'd learned to project calm regardless of internal stress levels, her posture reflecting years of training that had become automatic responses to situations requiring psychological evaluation. Dr. Westbrook, isolation becomes manageable when you understand that your mission success depends entirely on your ability to maintain focus despite circumstances that would normally require external support. The psychiatrist noted the way Iskra's responses demonstrated classic adaptation to extreme operational stress, psychological mechanisms that allowed individuals to function effectively in situations that would overwhelm normal stress management techniques. "Commander, extended isolation can produce psychological effects that persist long after the operational situation concludes. Have you experienced any symptoms that suggest ongoing stress responses?" Dr. Westbrook, the most significant psychological challenge wasn't isolation. It was the constant awareness that any mistake could result in capture by adversaries who would consider my presence an act of war. That level of operational pressure creates psychological adaptations that don't necessarily resolve when the immediate threat is removed. Dr. Westbrook recognized in Iskra's responses the psychological profile of someone who'd operated beyond normal human endurance parameters, developing coping mechanisms that represented both extraordinary resilience and potential long-term psychological costs. "Commander, your ability to maintain operational effectiveness under those conditions suggests psychological adaptations that extend far beyond normal military training. How do you assess your current psychological state?" Iskra's pause before responding indicated consideration of factors that extended beyond simple self-assessment. Dr. Westbrook, 3 years of operating without external validation or support systems creates a psychological independence that can be both operationally valuable and personally isolating. "I've learned to trust my own judgment in situations where conventional military thinking might suggest alternative approaches." The psychiatrist noted that Iskra's responses suggested psychological adaptations that, while operationally effective, might create challenges in reintegrating with conventional military structures, where individual judgment was balanced against institutional protocols and procedures. "Commander, your intelligence assessments have been accepted at the highest levels of command, but the transition from independent operation to institutional integration can create psychological stresses that aren't immediately apparent. How do you feel about returning to conventional military structure?" Iskra's smile carried the complex mix of relief and apprehension that marked someone who'd adapted to extreme independence while recognizing the value of institutional support systems. Dr. Westbrook, the advantage of operating independently is complete freedom to make tactical decisions based on immediate circumstances. The disadvantage is complete responsibility for strategic assessments that could affect national security. I'm looking forward to sharing that responsibility with institutions that have resources and expertise I couldn't access during deep cover operations. Dr. Westbrook concluded her assessment with the recognition that Iskra represented a unique case study in psychological adaptation to extreme operational stress. Her psychological profile suggested someone who not only survived conditions that would break most individuals, but had actually developed enhanced capabilities that made her more effective rather than less effective as operational stress increased. Commander, my assessment indicates that you've developed psychological adaptations that represent both extraordinary resilience and valuable operational capabilities. Your return to conventional military structure should be managed carefully to preserve the psychological independence that made your deep cover operations successful, while reintegrating you with institutional support systems that can enhance rather than constrain your operational effectiveness. As the evaluation concluded, Alina met with Dr. Westbrook to discuss the implications of her assessment. Doctor, what's your professional opinion of Commander Petrov's psychological state? Dr. Westbrook's response carried the careful precision of someone whose assessments could affect both individual careers and national security operations. Major, Commander Petrov represents a fascinating case study in human psychological adaptation. She's developed coping mechanisms that allowed her to maintain operational effectiveness under conditions that would normally produce psychological breakdown. However, those same adaptations create challenges in conventional military integration that will require careful management. Alina nodded, recognizing that Iskra's return involved complexities that extended far beyond simple personnel reassignment. Doctor, in your opinion, is she fit for continued operational duties? Major, Commander Petrov isn't just fit for operational duties. She's developed capabilities that make her extraordinarily valuable for missions that require independent judgment under extreme stress. However, her psychological profile suggests she's most effective when given maximum operational autonomy and minimum bureaucratic constraint. As Alina considered the implications of the psychological assessment, she recognized that Iskra's return represented both an intelligence windfall and a personnel challenge that would require institutional flexibility to manage effectively. The pilot who'd conducted deep reconnaissance missions for 3 years had developed capabilities that conventional military structure might not be equipped to utilize effectively. The strategic assessment briefing brought together the highest levels of military command to evaluate intelligence that could reshape fundamental assumptions about national security and global military balance. In the Pentagon's most secure conference room, officers whose combined experience represented decades of strategic planning studied intelligence that suggested their most basic assumptions about American military superiority might be dangerously outdated. Secretary of Defense Robert Hayes presided over the briefing, with the grim recognition that the intelligence Iskra had gathered represented either the most significant strategic threat since the Cold War or the most elaborate intelligence deception in military history. Either possibility required responses that would test institutional capabilities and strategic flexibility. Ladies and gentlemen, Secretary Hayes began, his voice carrying the weight of decisions that could affect global stability. Commander Petrov's intelligence suggests our adversaries have achieved technological capabilities that could neutralize our air superiority advantage within months. If these assessments are accurate, we're facing a strategic situation